Hello and welcome to this video. My name is Corinne from corinneworsley.com, and in this video I would like to ask you, how comfortable are you with discomfort? So if you're anything like me and anything like most people, you will do almost anything to avoid discomfort, which is a natural human instinct, you might say. But there is a point at which trying to avoid discomfort becomes dysfunctional and becomes damaging to us. So what do I mean by this? So you may have heard the term numbing used. In particular, Brené Brown uses this term a lot in her work. And what that means is using something to numb the discomfort that we are feeling. So that's something, it could be food, it could be alcohol, it could be too much work, it could be sex, it could be just general busyness. We all have the things that we turn to in order to help us avoid feelings of discomfort. It could be, if you're like me, controlling. It could be trying to control anything and everything around us in order to feel like we have some modicum of control in our lives and some way of controlling the inevitable discomfort that we will feel at various points in our lives. So why is it that we choose to avoid discomfort instead of just going with it and just allowing ourselves to feel it? Well, one of the main reasons is vulnerability, trying to avoid feeling vulnerable. Now, none of us wants to feel vulnerable. It is natural that we try to protect ourselves, that we perhaps even see being vulnerable and being seen to be vulnerable as a weakness. But actually it is just human. It's part of our humanity. We are emotional beings and we will therefore experience vulnerability. And experiencing vulnerability does not mean in any way, shape or form that we are weak. And it does not mean that if we're hurt, for instance, when we're vulnerable, that we can't recover from it, that we can't learn lessons from it and move forward. I think this is why so many of us try to avoid vulnerability at every step. It's because we're afraid, we're worried that if we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and if we then get hurt, that we won't be able to recover, that things will never be the same again and that we will never be the same again. And in truth, we won't. We won't ever be the same again. We will have learned. We will have perhaps learned that we need better boundaries. Or we will have perhaps learned that along the way we experienced some joy and that joy was worth every bit of vulnerability that we felt. Because the thing is, with numbing our discomfort and trying to avoid vulnerability, is that we not only numb the difficult emotions of sadness, anger, pain, but we also end up numbing the good emotions. We also end up preventing ourselves from experiencing joy and happiness and delight and excitement. So ask yourself this. Say, for instance, you're someone who reaches for food to help alleviate discomfort. Do you only find yourself reaching for that food when you are stressed, when you're worried, when you're sad? Or do you also find that when you experience intense moments of joy and excitement and happiness, that you find it equally difficult to handle those emotions and you find yourself reaching for that same food in order to numb the good feelings? I certainly know that this is true in my case. I have definitely noticed that it is not only in times when I'm sad that I feel the need to reach out and mask my discomfort. But it's also when I'm experiencing the feelings that I say I want to feel. And the reason is because when we're experiencing that joy and that excitement and that happiness, we have in the back of our minds that it's going to be taken away from us, that it's going to be momentary, and that to fully let go and fully experience it just opens us up to too much vulnerability, too much potential pain when inevitably that feeling ends and that feeling perhaps gets taken away from us. And it's almost like we're tempting fate if we allow ourselves to feel those feelings. So I'd love you to just examine the areas where you struggle with discomfort the most. So for some of us it might be around work, for some of us it might be around relationships. And then also just examine what you do, how you try and alleviate the discomfort around the vulnerability that you are feeling in those areas. And just start to be really, really aware of it, and aware as well of the impact that numbing is having on your life. Are you disconnected from your life? Are you disconnected from people? You know, there's always a consequence. Numbing, really, when we think about it in the most literal sense, is it's taking away all feeling. And when you take away all feeling, of course, disconnection is what results. So there could be disconnection from the people around us, or it could be disconnection from our purpose and from what we are here to do. Because, along with relationships and along with work, figuring out our purpose and figuring out who we are and showing up as that person is an extremely vulnerable place to be. It's an extremely vulnerable way of living, because we leave ourselves open to attack, and we leave our true selves open to attack rather than the false self that we use in order to protect our true selves. So ask yourself, is this numbing? Firstly, is it doing me damage? So for instance, if it's food, if it's alcohol, if it's drugs, if it's sex, all of those things to excess, and when we feel like they have control over us, are damaging to both our physical and our mental well-being, and also to our relationships. We find ourselves self-sabotaging all of our efforts in all of our areas that we're working on. So for instance, if I find that I have a week or so of reaching for too much Haribo, then that's completely counterintuitive to how I want to feel in my body. It's completely contradictory, and then I find my jeans are getting tighter and I'm just so unhappy with myself for giving in to that urge to numb. And then I will use that as a way of beating myself up and saying that I'm not good enough. So check in with the impact of your numbing. If it's only minor and you really know that it happens only from time to time, then great. That's an excellent place to be. Even better to move away from the numbing and to learn how to feel the feelings. But if you feel you have control over it, then that's great. If, however, you know that very often the thing that you use to numb actually ends up having control over you, then it's time to really reflect on what you could do to start feeling the feelings that you're trying to avoid, instead of numbing them and avoiding them. And the thing is, when we try and move away from discomfort, when we try to avoid vulnerability, that process actually ends up being more long-winded and more drawn out, and ultimately more painful than if we just sat with the emotion for a short period of time. Because those emotions, they pass, and they pass when they're acknowledged. We have to acknowledge how we are feeling, in order to allow it to move through us. And we have to acknowledge how we're feeling in order to glean the valuable information that that feeling and that emotion has for us. Maybe that emotion is teaching us how much we care about something or someone. Maybe that emotion is giving us valuable feedback about a situation that we're in. Maybe it is a situation where we recognize that we've let our boundaries be trampled all over, and we really need to find a way of standing up for ourselves, standing up for what we believe in, and not allowing that to happen again. And maybe it is actually the uncertainty of life and the uncertainty of situations that you find yourself in that is excruciating for you. I know it is for me, and that's what leads you to numb, so that you don't have to face that uncertain feeling, or perhaps you make up stories to fill in the blanks when you're faced with uncertainty, and it's those stories that are leading you to feel negative emotions and then to lean into numbing, when actually, when it comes to uncertainty and vulnerability, really our power lies in accepting them and accepting that they're a part of life, that we can't ever escape them. There are, of course, things that we can do to reduce the level of uncertainty in our lives, but it will never disappear completely. And so if we're consistently trying to numb in order to deal with vulnerability and uncertainty, then we really are in need of making a change in our lives, a change in our way of being. And that change is to sit with the emotion, to feel it, and to take whatever lessons we can from that emotion. Otherwise, we spend our lives consistently running from the reality of who we are and the reality of our lives, rather than facing it and then feeling empowered and feeling like we have the knowledge to actually be able to do something, to actually be able to affect change in our lives. So I hope that that video has served you today. It was very much something that has been on my heart the past couple of days. If you do have any questions or comments, I would love to hear them. And if you want to learn more about vulnerability and numbing, I would highly recommend looking at Brené Brown's work. She is a goddess in this area. And if you feel like you need some support in facing the reality of your life, then I am the woman for you. Please do get in touch via my contact page on my website, www.corinworsley.com/contact, or you can email me at corin@corinworsley.com, and I will get back to you as soon as I can to organise for us to have a chat and see how working together might benefit you. So I wish you a wonderful rest of the day, evening, wherever you are, and I very much look forward to catching you on next week's video. Bye for now.